My name is Keaton Merren, and I'm an IT security manager who thought he understood the concept of vulnerability assessment. Turns out, I'd been running the wrong diagnostics on my own life for years. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday morning when I found Zoya's phone charging on the kitchen counter. She never left it behind. Ever. My wife treated that device like a life support system, checking it every 30 seconds with the dedication of a cardiac surgeon monitoring vitals. But there it sat, buzzing with incoming messages while she rushed upstairs for her forgotten earrings. I shouldn't have looked. In cybersecurity, we call it unauthorized access. In marriage, they call it the beginning of the end. The preview screen showed 3 unread messages from D with timestamps from the previous night. The most recent one made my coffee taste like copper. Last night was incredible. Can't wait for Friday's conference in Portland. Same hotel? Zoya came downstairs in her navy blazer, the one she wore when she wanted to project authority at the financial firm where she worked as a senior analyst. She grabbed her phone without looking at it, kissed my cheek with the efficiency of someone checking off a task list, and headed for the door. "Working late again tonight," she called over her shoulder. "Don't wait up." I sat there for 20 minutes after she left, staring at my reflection in the black coffee. My face looked older than 39, with lines around my eyes that hadn't been there a year ago. When had I started looking like someone who expected disappointment? The thing about IT security is that you learn to think like a hacker. You identify weak points, trace digital footprints, and reconstruct events from fragments of data. It's methodical work that requires patience and attention to detail. Skills that, as it turned out, translated surprisingly well to investigating your own marriage. I started small. Credit card statements revealed charges at restaurants I'd never been to, hotels in cities where Zoya claimed to have client meetings. Her girls' night out with Tamsin happened every Thursday, but Tamsin posted Instagram stories from her book club those same nights. The digital breadcrumbs painted a picture I'd been too trusting to see. Work became my refuge. The downtown high-rise where I managed network security for Meridian Technologies felt more honest than my own home. At least there, the threats were external and identifiable. My boss, Mr. Rickert, was a stickler for documentation and proper procedures, which suited my methodical nature perfectly. "Merren, I need the quarterly security assessment by Friday," he said, stopping by my desk that Wednesday morning. "Board wants a comprehensive review of all potential vulnerabilities." "Already 90% complete," I replied, pulling up the report on my screen. "I've identified several weak points in our email encryption protocols." Rickert nodded approvingly. He was a thin man in his 50s who treated cybersecurity like a military operation. "Excellent. Your thoroughness is exactly why I recommended you for the promotion track." The promotion. I'd forgotten about it entirely. 6 months ago, it had seemed like the most important thing in my world. Now it felt like someone else's dream. That evening, I decided to test a theory. I told Zoya I'd be working late on the security assessment, then drove to Marlowe's, the upscale bar downtown where she claimed to meet clients for drinks. The place had floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a clear view of the interior from the street. I parked across the street at 6:30 and waited. Zoya arrived at 7:15, but she wasn't alone. The man with her was tall, well-dressed, and definitely not a client. He moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. When he placed his hand on the small of her back to guide her to a corner booth, the gesture was intimate and familiar. I recognized him from the legal notices in the business section of the local paper. Darren Halloway, partner at Halloway, Sterling and Associates. Married, father of 2. The kind of man who probably had his law degree framed in his office, and his wedding photo prominently displayed on his desk. They sat close together, sharing drinks and conversation that made Zoya laugh in a way I hadn't heard in months. When Darren leaned over to whisper something in her ear, She touched his arm and smiled with genuine warmth. It was like watching my wife transform into someone I didn't recognize. I sat in my car for 2 hours, documenting everything with the same methodical approach I used for security assessments. Timestamps, behavioral observations, photographic evidence. By the time they left together, I had enough material to build a comprehensive case file. The drive home gave me time to process what I'd witnessed. The anger would come later. Right now, I felt something closer to professional curiosity. How long had this been going on? How had I missed the signs? More importantly, what was I going to do about it? Zoya was already in bed when I got home, pretending to be asleep. I went to my home office and opened a new encrypted folder on my computer. I labeled it Project Verification and began uploading the evening's documentation. In cybersecurity, we have a saying, trust but verify. I'd been doing too much trusting and not enough verifying. Time to balance the equation. The next morning, Zoya announced she'd be attending a financial conference in Portland over the weekend. Boring stuff, she said, not meeting my eyes. Regulatory compliance seminars and networking events. Sounds important, I replied, watching her face for tells. Which hotel are you staying at? The Meridian downtown, standard corporate booking. She paused at the door. You should do something fun while I'm gone. Maybe call Jonah, grab some drinks. Jonah Martinez was my closest friend, a bartender at Riverside Tavern who had an encyclopedic knowledge of the city's social dynamics. If anyone could provide insight into Darren Holloway's reputation, it would be him. After Zoya left for work, I called Jonah and arranged to meet him that afternoon during his break. Riverside Tavern was the kind of neighborhood establishment where locals gathered to decompress and share gossip. Jonah had been working there for 8 years, which made him a repository of information about who was sleeping with whom, who was having financial troubles, and who was generally considered trustworthy. Darren Holloway, Jonah repeated when I brought up the name. He was a compact man in his early 40s with graying hair and observant eyes. Yeah, I know him. Comes in here sometimes with other lawyers. Expensive suits, expensive watch, expensive ego. What's his reputation like? Jonah studied my face. Why do you ask? Professional curiosity. His firm handles some corporate accounts that might overlap with our security contracts. It wasn't entirely a lie, but Jonah had known me long enough to recognize when I was being evasive. He leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. Holloway's got a reputation as a smooth operator, good lawyer, but the kind of guy who thinks rules apply to other people. He's married to some event planner, but that doesn't stop him from hitting on anything in a skirt. Jonah paused. Word is, he's been having an affair with someone. Nobody knows who, but his wife apparently hired a private investigator a few months back. That information hit like a system alert. If Darren's wife was already suspicious, it meant I wasn't the only one dealing with a cheating spouse. It also meant there might be an opportunity for collaboration. What's his wife's name? Ilara something. Trenix, I think. She runs that high-end event planning company, Signature Occasions. Handles all the fancy corporate parties and charity galas downtown. I filed that information away for later investigation. Right now, I needed to focus on gathering more evidence about Zoya and Darren's relationship. Friday arrived with unseasonable rain that matched my mood. Zoya packed her overnight bag with the efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. She kissed me goodbye with the same perfunctory affection she'd shown all week. I'll call you tonight, she promised, already reaching for her car keys. Have a good conference, I replied, knowing she'd never actually attend one. After she left, I drove to the airport and confirmed what I already suspected. No flights to Portland under her name. Instead, I found a reservation for 2 at the Grandview Resort, a luxury spa destination 2 hours north of the city. The reservation was under Darren's name, with Zoya listed as his companion. The evidence was mounting, but I needed something more definitive. something that would stand up to scrutiny and couldn't be explained away as coincidence or misunderstanding. That's when I remembered the USB drive. Zoya had been working on a financial analysis project for weeks, staying up late in her home office and muttering about spreadsheet formulas. She'd mentioned backing up her work files to multiple drives as a precaution. If she'd been using her personal computer for anything beyond work, there might be traces. I found the USB drive in her desk drawer, tucked inside an old jewelry box. My hands were shaking as I plugged it into my laptop and ran a data recovery scan. What I found exceeded my worst expectations. Email threads between Zoya and Darren dating back 4 months. Hotel confirmations for weekend getaways. Photos that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Financial records showing Darren had been paying for dinners, jewelry, and even a weekend trip to wine country. But the most damaging evidence was a series of text messages Zoya had saved as screenshots. Messages where she and Darren discussed their respective spouses in terms that made my stomach turn. "Keaton's so wrapped up in his computers he wouldn't notice if I disappeared for a week," read one message from Zoya. Darren's response: "Ilara's the same way with her events. Sometimes I think they'd be happier married to their work." Another exchange was even worse. "Do you think they suspect anything?" Zoya had asked. "Even if they did, what would they do? Keaton doesn't have the spine to confront anyone, and Ilara's too concerned with appearances to make a scene." I stared at that message for a long time. They'd been counting on our predictability, banking on the assumption that we'd be too passive or too proud to fight back. They'd calculated the risk and decided we were acceptable casualties in their romantic adventure. That was their first mistake. I spent the weekend creating a comprehensive dossier. Every email, every photo, every financial transaction, every lie about working late or attending conferences. I cross-referenced dates with credit card statements, matched locations with social media posts, and built a timeline that told the complete story of their affair. By Sunday night, I had enough evidence to end my marriage and destroy Darren's career. But ending things wasn't enough anymore. They'd made this personal with their casual dismissal of my character and their assumption that I'd be too weak to respond. They were about to learn that underestimating your opponent is the most dangerous vulnerability of all. Monday morning brought an email that changed everything. The sender was listed as Trenix Events, with a subject line that made my pulse quicken. Regarding mutual concerns. "Mr. Merren, I believe we may have something important to discuss. Would you be available to meet this afternoon? I suggest neutral ground. Riverside Tavern at 4 p.m. I'll be wearing a blue scarf." She'd found me before I'd found her. That meant Ilara Trenix was either very good at her job or very desperate. Possibly both. I arrived at Riverside Tavern 15 minutes early and chose a corner table with clear sight lines to the entrance. Jonah was working the bar, and he nodded when he saw me, understanding without words that this wasn't a social visit. Ilara Trenix walked in at exactly 4 o'clock. She was an elegant woman in her late 30s with auburn hair and the kind of understated confidence that comes from years of managing high-stakes events. The blue scarf was silk, and her entire appearance suggested someone who understood the importance of making the right impression. She spotted me immediately and approached with measured steps. "Mr. Merren, I'm Ilara Trenix. Thank you for agreeing to meet." Her handshake was firm, her eye contact direct. She sat across from me and placed a leather portfolio on the table between us. "I assume you know why I'm here," she said without preamble. "I have a good idea. The question is how you found me." "Your wife isn't as careful as she thinks she is. She used her real name at the Grandview Resort, and my private investigator photographed her with my husband 3 weeks ago." Ilara opened her portfolio and slid a photograph across the table. "I believe this belongs to you." The image showed Zoya and Darren in an intimate embrace beside a hotel pool. Zoya was wearing the red bikini I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. The irony wasn't lost on me. "How long have you known?" I asked. Definitively? 2 months? Suspected? Much longer. Darren's not as clever as he believes himself to be. She paused. What about you? Confirmed it last week. Suspected it for about the same time frame as you. Alara nodded. Then we're both dealing with the same problem. The question is what we intend to do about it. I studied her face, looking for tells. In cybersecurity, you learn to read people the same way you read code. Alara's expression was controlled, but I could see the anger beneath the surface. She wasn't here for reconciliation or couples therapy. She was here for war. What did you have in mind? I asked. Something that ensures they face consequences for their choices. Something that makes them understand the cost of treating their spouses like acceptable collateral damage. She leaned forward slightly. I've been planning this for weeks, Mr. Merren. I just needed the right partner. Call me Keaton, and what makes you think I'm the right partner? Because you're in IT security, which means you understand systems and documentation. Because you're methodical enough to have gathered evidence before acting. And because, frankly, you have just as much to gain from this as I do. She was right on all counts. I pulled out my phone and showed her a sample of the evidence I'd compiled. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through the timeline of hotel visits, restaurant charges, and email exchanges. This is very thorough, she said with genuine admiration. Professional quality. I'm good at my job. The question is whether you're good at yours. Alara smiled for the first time since sitting down. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Mr. Merren, Keaton, I've been planning events for 15 years. I know how to coordinate complex operations, manage multiple variables, and ensure everything comes together at exactly the right moment. I also know how to make people's lives very, very difficult when they cross me. She opened her portfolio again and pulled out a thick legal document. This is Darren's prenuptial agreement, specifically Section 12, subsection 4, which details the financial consequences of adultery. If I can prove he's been unfaithful, he loses everything: the house, the cars, his stake in the law firm, even his retirement accounts. I studied the relevant section. The language was ironclad. This is brutal. Darren insisted on it when we got married. He was so confident in his own fidelity that he agreed to terms that would destroy him financially if he ever strayed. He thought it demonstrated his commitment. Her smile turned predatory. It's going to demonstrate his stupidity instead. What about Zoya? What about her? She's not going to lose everything the way Darren will. Our finances are more intertwined, and we don't have a prenup. Alara leaned back in her chair. Financial ruin isn't the only form of consequence, Keaton. Your wife works in financial services, where reputation and trust are everything. How do you think her career prospects will look after her colleagues, learn she's been embezzling company time and resources to conduct an extramarital affair? The word embezzling caught my attention. Explain. She's been using company credit cards for personal expenses related to the affair. Dinners with Darren, hotel rooms, even a weekend trip that she claimed was a client development opportunity. I have the receipts. Alara slid another folder across the table. My investigator was very thorough. I flipped through the documentation. Zoya had indeed been charging personal expenses to her corporate account, then filing them under various business categories. It wasn't technically embezzlement, but it was definitely grounds for termination and professional disgrace. You've been planning this for a while, I observed. 2 months of careful preparation. I know their schedules, their habits, their weaknesses, and their escape routes. What I didn't have was someone with access to the digital evidence that would make the case unassailable. She gestured to my phone. You have that evidence. And you have the legal and financial leverage to make them pay for what they've done. Exactly. We sat in silence for a moment, each evaluating the other. This wasn't just about ending our marriages anymore. This was about ensuring that Zoya and Darren faced real consequences for their betrayal. It was about making them understand that their actions had costs they hadn't calculated. "There's something else," Alara said quietly. "Something you should know before we proceed." "What?" "They're planning to leave their spouses, both of them. Darren's been consulting with a divorce attorney, and according to my investigator, he's been discussing strategies for minimizing his financial exposure. They think they're going to ride off into the sunset together while we pick up the pieces of our lives." The information hit like a system crash. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning to abandon their families entirely. The casual cruelty of it was staggering. "When?" I asked. "Soon. Darren's been moving money into offshore accounts that he thinks I don't know about. Your wife has been researching apartments in the city, expensive ones that she couldn't afford on her current salary. Unless she's planning to move in with Darren." "Exactly." I thought about Zoya's behavior over the past few weeks. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way she'd been emotionally distant even when we were in the same room. She'd been preparing to leave, probably working up the courage to have the conversation that would end our marriage. "How long do we have?" I asked. Based on their timeline, I'd estimate 2 weeks, maybe 3, if they decide to wait until after the Morrison Charity Gala next month. The Morrison Gala was one of the city's premier social events, the kind of gathering where the local business elite came together to network and be seen. Alara's company had been handling the event planning for years. "You're coordinating the gala?" "I am, which means I control the guest list, the seating arrangements, the schedule, and the logistics." Her expression turned calculating. "It also means I have the perfect venue for a very public reckoning." The pieces were starting to come together. A plan was forming in my mind, built around the systematic exposure of Zoya and Darren's affair in the most damaging way possible. Not just ending their relationship, but destroying their reputations and their futures in the process. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked. "A coordinated response that ensures they face consequences on multiple fronts: legal, financial, professional, and social. I handle the legal and social aspects. You handle the digital evidence and professional exposure. And the timeline? We let them think they're in control for another week. Let them get comfortable, maybe even careless. Then we strike simultaneously, before they have a chance to coordinate their defense or minimize the damage." It was a solid strategy. In cybersecurity, we call it a multi-vector attack, hitting multiple vulnerabilities simultaneously to overwhelm the target's ability to respond effectively. "I'm in," I said. Alara extended her hand across the table. "Partners?" "Partners." We shook hands, and I felt something shift inside me. For weeks, I'd been reactive, responding to discoveries and trying to process the emotional impact of Zoya's betrayal. Now I was moving into active mode, taking control of the situation and working toward a specific objective. "There's one more thing," Alara said as we prepared to leave. "We need to be absolutely certain about our evidence. Once we move forward with this, there's no going back. They'll know we were working together, and they'll do everything they can to discredit us or turn the situation around. The evidence is solid. Digital forensics, financial records, photographic documentation, witness statements. It would stand up in court." "Good, because that's exactly where some of it might end up." We exchanged contact information and agreed to meet again in 2 days to finalize our strategy. As Alara gathered her materials and prepared to leave, I found myself reassessing everything I thought I knew about my situation. I'd started this process thinking I was the victim of my wife's infidelity. Now I was beginning to understand that I was actually the target of a more calculated betrayal. Zoya and Darren hadn't just fallen into an affair. They'd been planning a future together while systematically deceiving their spouses. That changed everything. This wasn't about forgiveness or reconciliation anymore. This was about justice. I drove home that evening with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. Zoya was working late again, which gave me time to review my evidence files and begin preparing for the next phase of the operation. The house felt different now that I knew she was planning to leave it. The furniture we'd chosen together, the photos from our early years, the small domestic details that had once represented our shared life, all of it felt like props in a play that was about to end. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoya. "Client dinner running late. Don't wait up." I checked the timestamp against Darren's schedule, which Alara had provided. He was supposed to be at a bar association meeting until 9:30. The timeline didn't match, which meant they were together again. Instead of anger, I felt something closer to satisfaction. Every lie they told, every deception they practiced, every moment they spent together was additional evidence for the case we were building against them. They thought they were being clever. They thought they'd calculated all the variables and minimized all the risks. They thought their spouses were predictable, passive, and ultimately harmless. They were about to learn that their risk assessment had been fundamentally flawed. I opened a new document on my computer and began outlining the next phase of our operation. By the time Zoya came home at midnight, I had a comprehensive plan that would systematically dismantle everything they'd built together. She slipped into bed beside me, probably assuming I was asleep. I lay still and listened to her breathing, thinking about how different everything would be in 2 weeks. The trap was set. Now it was just a matter of execution. The Morrison Charity Gala was still 2 weeks away, but Alara and I had decided to accelerate our timeline. Zoya's behavior had become increasingly careless, and Darren was showing signs of impatience that suggested they might move faster than anticipated. The catalyst came on Wednesday morning when I discovered Zoya had opened a new bank account without telling me. The monthly statement arrived in our mail, addressed to her alone, showing deposits that didn't match her salary and withdrawals for expenses I didn't recognize. I photographed the statement and sent it to Alara with a simple message: "We need to move now." Her response came within an hour. "Agreed. Coffee at 10 a.m., same place." This time, Alara arrived with a detailed action plan. She'd been busy since our last meeting, gathering additional intelligence and preparing what she called the infrastructure for their downfall. "Darren's been more active than we thought," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "My investigator followed him to 3 different banks yesterday. He's liquidating assets and moving money into accounts I can't access." "How much money are we talking about?" "Enough to support both of them for several years if they're careful. He's planning to disappear, Keaton. They both are." The documentation painted a picture of systematic financial preparation. Darren had been converting joint assets into liquid funds, transferring money to offshore accounts, and even purchasing prepaid credit cards that would be difficult to trace. What about Zoya? She's been more subtle, but equally methodical. Small withdrawals from your joint accounts, redirected mail for financial statements, even a new cell phone plan under a different name. Alara pulled out another set of documents. "She's been planning this for months." The evidence was overwhelming. This wasn't an impulsive affair that had gotten out of hand. This was a coordinated effort to abandon their marriages while maximizing their financial resources and minimizing their legal exposure. "They're treating us like obstacles to be managed," I said. "Exactly. Which is why our response needs to be equally coordinated and equally devastating." Alara opened her laptop and showed me a detailed timeline. Phase 1 begins tomorrow. I'm filing for divorce and invoking the prenuptial agreement. My attorney will serve Darren at his office in front of his partners and staff. That's going to create immediate chaos. That's the point. While he's dealing with the legal and professional fallout, you'll be implementing Phase 2 with Zoya. Which is? Freezing your joint accounts and filing a complaint with her employer about the misuse of company resources. I have documentation of every fraudulent expense report she's filed in the past 4 months. The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. By attacking simultaneously on multiple fronts, we'd overwhelm their ability to coordinate a defense. They'd be too busy dealing with immediate crises to mount an effective counterattack. What about the evidence we've gathered about their affair? That's Phase 3. Once they're both destabilized and desperate, We release everything to their professional networks, social circles, and anyone else who might be interested in their true character. When do we start? Tomorrow morning. Are you ready? I thought about Zoya sleeping peacefully in our bed, probably dreaming about her future with Darren. I thought about the lies she'd told, the money she'd stolen, the casual way she'd dismissed my worth as a human being in her messages to her lover. I'm ready. The next morning, I drove to work early and implemented the first phase of our plan. Using my administrative access to our bank's online system, I froze all joint accounts and credit cards, citing suspicious activity that required investigation. It wasn't technically fraud. As a joint account holder, I had every right to request a security hold, but it would effectively cut off Zoya's access to our shared finances. Next, I compiled a comprehensive report documenting Zoya's misuse of company resources and submitted it to her HR department. The report included copies of fraudulent expense reports, evidence of personal charges on company credit cards, and documentation of time theft related to her affair. By 9 a.m., both actions were complete and irreversible. Ilara texted me at 9:15. Darren has been served. His partners are not pleased. The response came faster than expected. My phone rang at 9:30 with Zoya's name on the caller ID. Keaton, what the hell did you do? Her voice was shaking with rage. I can't access any of our accounts, and HR just called me into a meeting. I implemented some security measures, I replied calmly. There's been some suspicious activity on our accounts that needed investigation. Don't lie to me, I know what you're doing. Do you? Because I'm not sure you've been entirely honest with me about what you've been doing. There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Calculating. We need to talk. I agree. Why don't you come by my office after your HR meeting? I'll be here all day. Fine, but this isn't over, Keaton. No, I said. It's just beginning. I spent the next 2 hours preparing for Zoya's arrival. I arranged the evidence files on my desk, set up a digital recorder, and made sure my office door would remain open during our conversation. I wanted witnesses to whatever was about to happen. Ilara arrived at 11:30, as we'd planned. She was impeccably dressed and carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd just won a significant victory. How did Darren take the news? I asked. About as well as you'd expect. He tried to claim the prenup was invalid, then threatened to countersue for defamation. His partners asked him to take a leave of absence while the situation gets sorted out. And how are you feeling about all this? Vindicated, angry, relieved. She sat down in the chair beside my desk. Mostly satisfied that he's finally facing consequences for his choices. We didn't have to wait long. Zoya appeared in my office doorway at 12:15, her face flushed with anger and her professional composure completely shattered. She started to speak, then noticed Ilara sitting beside my desk. "Who is this?" she demanded. I didn't stand up. I didn't raise my voice. I simply turned my chair and made the introduction that would change everything. Zoya, I'd like you to meet Ilara Trenix. She's married to your lover, Darren Holloway. Ilara, this is my wife, Zoya. The color drained from Zoya's face. She looked from me to Ilara and back again, her mouth opening and closing without producing any sound. We've been comparing notes, I continued conversationally. It's amazing how much information two people can gather when they work together. Zoya found her voice. This is insane. You can't just what? Ilara interrupted. Can't just document our spouse's affair? Can't just protect our financial interests? Can't just ensure that actions have consequences? I don't know what you think you know, but... I pulled out my phone and played one of the audio messages Zoya had sent to Darren the previous week. Her own voice filled the office, describing in intimate detail what she wanted to do with him when they were finally free of their boring, predictable spouses. Zoya's face went white. Where did you get that? You really should be more careful about your digital security, I said. Backing up personal files to shared cloud storage was a rookie mistake. Ilara opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. We have everything, Zoya. Emails, text messages, financial records, photographs, hotel receipts, restaurant charges, 4 months of documentation that proves you and Darren have been planning to abandon your families while stealing from your respective employers. That's not… We weren't… Weren't what? I asked. Weren't planning to leave us? Weren't stealing money to fund your new life together? Weren't laughing about how stupid and predictable we were? Zoya's composure finally cracked completely. You don't understand. Darren and I, we never meant for this to happen. It just happened? Alara's voice was ice cold. Opening offshore bank accounts just happened? Filing fraudulent expense reports just happened? Planning to disappear with stolen money just happened? We were going to tell you both. We were just waiting for the right time. The right time, I repeated. You mean after you'd finished looting our joint accounts and securing your financial future? Zoya looked around my office, probably noticing for the first time that several of my colleagues were watching the confrontation with obvious interest. Her professional reputation was being destroyed in real time, and she knew it. What do you want? She asked quietly. Justice, Alara replied. Consequences, accountability for your choices. And cooperation, I added. You're going to help us ensure that Darren faces the same consequences you're facing. I won't testify against him. You won't have to. We have enough evidence to destroy both of your careers without your testimony. I gestured to the files on my desk. But your cooperation might help minimize some of the damage to your own reputation. Zoya stared at the documentation, probably calculating her options and realizing she didn't have many. What kind of cooperation? Full disclosure of Darren's financial activities, passwords to any shared accounts or communication channels, documentation of his plans to leave his family and his law practice. And if I refuse? Alara smiled. Then we release everything we have to your employer, your professional network, your family, and anyone else who might be interested in your true character. We also pursue every legal remedy available to us, including criminal charges for embezzlement and fraud. You can't prove embezzlement. Maybe not in criminal court, but we can certainly prove it in civil court, and we can definitely prove it to your employer's satisfaction. I pulled out another folder. Your company has a zero-tolerance policy for misuse of corporate resources. HR has already started their investigation. Zoya looked trapped, which was exactly how we wanted her to feel. She'd spent months planning her escape, confident that she could manipulate the situation to her advantage. Now she was discovering that her victims had been planning too. I need time to think about this, she said. You have until 5 p.m. today, Alara replied. After that, we move forward with or without your cooperation. That's not enough time. It's more time than you gave us when you decided to destroy our marriages, I said. 5 p.m., Zoya. Don't be late. She left without another word, her professional composure completely shattered. Through my office window, I watched her walk to her car with the unsteady gait of someone whose world had just collapsed. Think she'll cooperate? Alara asked. She'll try to warn Darren first, but yes, ultimately she'll cooperate. She doesn't have any other choice. And Darren? Darren's going to discover that his legal training didn't prepare him for this kind of systematic destruction. By the time we're finished with him, he'll be lucky to keep his law license, let alone his marriage or his money. Alara gathered her materials and prepared to leave. Phase 3 begins tonight. Are you ready for the final phase? I've been ready since the moment I discovered what they were doing to us. Good, because after tonight, there's no going back for any of us. She was right. We'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But as I watched Zoya's car disappear into traffic, I felt no regret. Only satisfaction that justice was finally being served. The trap had been sprung. Now it was time to watch our prey struggle against the consequences of their own choices. Zoya didn't return to the office that afternoon. According to my colleagues, she'd called in sick after lunch, claiming she needed to deal with a family emergency. I knew better. She was probably meeting with Darren, trying to figure out how to minimize the damage we'd inflicted. At 4:30, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "This is Darren Halloway. We need to talk." I showed the message to Alara, who had returned to coordinate the final phase of our operation. "He's panicking," she said with satisfaction. "Zoya must have told him everything." Should I respond? Absolutely, but not how he expects. I typed back, "My office, 5 p.m. Come alone." His response was immediate. "This is a private matter. We should meet somewhere discreet." My office or nowhere, your choice. There was a long pause before his final message. Fine. Ilara and I spent the next 20 minutes preparing for Darren's arrival. We arranged the evidence files for maximum visual impact, set up recording equipment, and made sure my office door would remain open throughout the meeting. "Remember," Ilara said, "he's going to try to take control of the conversation. He's a lawyer, so he'll use intimidation tactics and legal threats. Don't let him." What if he tries to negotiate? Then we listen to what he has to offer, but we don't accept anything less than complete capitulation. Darren arrived at exactly 5 p.m., looking like a man who'd aged 5 years in a single day. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair was disheveled, and his usual confident demeanor had been replaced by barely controlled desperation. He stopped short when he saw Ilara sitting beside my desk. "What is she doing here?" "Hello, Darren," Ilara said calmly. "I thought it was time we all had an honest conversation." "This is inappropriate. I'm not discussing private matters in front of your wife?" I interrupted. "The woman you've been lying to for months while you plan to steal her money and abandon your family?" Darren's face flushed red. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" I pulled out my laptop and opened a folder containing dozens of documents. Bank records showing you've moved over $200,000 into offshore accounts. Email exchanges with Zoya discussing your plans to leave your respective spouses. Hotel receipts for romantic getaways charged to your law firm's corporate account. Those documents are illegally obtained. They can't be used in criminal court, maybe not, but in divorce proceedings, employment disputes, and professional misconduct hearings, they're perfectly admissible. Ilara leaned forward. "And that's exactly where they're going unless you cooperate with us." Darren looked around my office, probably noticing the same thing Zoya had observed earlier. We had an audience. Several of my colleagues were working late, and they were making no effort to hide their interest in the confrontation. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "Full financial disclosure," I replied. "Every account, every asset, every penny you've hidden from Ilara. Complete cessation of contact with Zoya," Ilara added. "No calls, no texts, no emails, no accidental encounters. And a public apology," I continued, "to both of us, and to anyone else who's been affected by your deception." Darren laughed bitterly. "You're insane if you think I'm going to..." "Going to what? Going to face consequences for your actions? Going to take responsibility for the damage you've caused?" Ilara's voice was steel. "You don't have a choice, Darren. We have enough evidence to destroy your career, your marriage, and your financial future. The only question is whether you're going to cooperate or whether we're going to have to drag you through every court in the state. You can't prove anything." I turned my laptop screen toward him and played a video file. The footage showed him and Zoya entering a hotel room together, kissing passionately in the hallway before disappearing inside. The timestamp showed it was taken 3 days ago. "Can't we?" I asked. Darren stared at the screen, his face growing pale. "Where did you get this?" "Security cameras are everywhere these days," Ilara said. "Amazing how much evidence people leave behind when they think they're being clever." "This is blackmail." "No," I corrected. "This is accountability. Blackmail would be if we demanded money or favors in exchange for our silence. We're not asking for your silence. We're demanding justice." Darren slumped in his chair, the fight going out of him. What exactly are you asking me to do? Return every penny you've stolen from Ilara, resign from your law firm, end all contact with Zoya, and submit to a complete financial audit to ensure you haven't hidden any other assets. And if I refuse? Then we release everything to the State Bar Association, your law firm's partners, your clients, and every media outlet in the city. Ilara pulled out her phone. I have contacts at 3 different newspapers and 2 television stations. Your affair will be front-page news by tomorrow morning. You wouldn't. Try me. We sat in silence for several minutes while Darren processed his options. I could see him running through legal strategies, looking for loopholes or escape routes. But Ilara and I had been thorough. We'd anticipated every possible defense and prepared countermeasures for each one. I need time to consider this, he finally said. You have until tomorrow morning, I replied. 9 a.m. After that, we move forward with or without your cooperation. That's not enough time to what? To move more money offshore? To coordinate a defense with Zoya? To hire a crisis management firm? Ilara shook her head. You've had months to plan your escape, Darren. Now you get 12 hours to plan your surrender. Darren stood up, his movements stiff and mechanical. This isn't over. Yes, I said quietly. It is. After he left, Ilara and I reviewed our position. We'd successfully cornered both Zoya and Darren, forcing them to choose between cooperation and complete destruction. But we knew they wouldn't give up without a fight. They're going to try something desperate, Ilara warned. People like this don't accept defeat gracefully. What kind of desperate? Character assassination, false accusations, maybe even an attempt to turn this around and make us look like the villains. She was right. Within an hour of Darren's departure, I received a call from HR requesting a meeting the following morning. Someone had filed a complaint, alleging that I'd been harassing a female employee and misusing company resources for personal vendettas. Zoya? Ilara asked when I told her about the call. Has to be. She's trying to discredit me before we can finish exposing her. What are you going to do? Show them the evidence, all of it. Let them decide who's telling the truth. The next morning's HR meeting was a masterclass in bureaucratic theater. Zoya had filed a detailed complaint alleging that I'd been stalking her, accessing her personal accounts without permission, and using my position at the company to intimidate her into silence about our marital problems. The HR director, a stern woman named Patricia Collins, listened to Zoya's presentation with professional neutrality. Then she turned to me. Mr. Merren, these are serious allegations. Do you have any response? I opened my laptop and projected the evidence files onto the conference room screen. I have documentation proving that Ms. Merren has been embezzling company funds, falsifying expense reports, and conducting an extramarital affair using corporate resources. The next 30 minutes were devastating for Zoya. I walked through every fraudulent expense report, every personal charge on company credit cards, every lie she'd told to cover her tracks. The evidence was overwhelming and meticulously documented. Furthermore, I continued, Ms. Merren's allegations against me are part of a coordinated effort to discredit the people who discovered her misconduct. I have audio recordings of her discussing these exact tactics with her lover. I played several of the most damaging recordings, including one where Zoya and Darren discussed strategies for neutralizing their spouses if they ever discovered the affair. Patricia Collins looked at Zoya with obvious disgust. Ms. Merren, do you have any response to this evidence? Zoya's face was ashen. Those recordings were obtained illegally. They can't be used. Ms. Merren, this is an employment investigation, not a criminal trial. These recordings are absolutely admissible for our purposes. Collins turned back to me. Mr. Merren, do you have any additional evidence? I do. I pulled out the final folder. Financial records showing that Ms. Merren has been planning to leave the company for months after liquidating as many corporate resources as possible. The meeting ended with Zoya's immediate termination and a referral to the company's legal department for potential criminal charges. As she gathered her belongings and left the building, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction. That afternoon, Ilara called with an update on Darren's situation. He tried to withdraw more money this morning, but I'd already frozen the accounts. His law firm partners held an emergency meeting and voted to suspend him pending a full investigation. Has he agreed to our terms? Not yet, but he's running out of options. The final confrontation came that evening. Darren showed up at my apartment building, looking desperate and disheveled. He'd been drinking, and his usual polished appearance was completely gone. "This has gone far enough," he said when I answered the door. "You've destroyed both our careers, ruined our reputations, and turned our families against us. What more do you want?" "I want you to understand that actions have consequences," I replied. "I want you to accept responsibility for the damage you've caused, and I want you to make sure this never happens to anyone else." "Fine. I'll agree to your terms. Just make this stop." "All of them?" "All of them." I pulled out a prepared agreement and handed it to him. "Sign this." Darren read through the document, his face growing paler with each paragraph. The terms were comprehensive: full financial restitution to Ilara, complete severance of contact with Zoya, resignation from his law firm, and submission to a professional ethics investigation. "This will destroy my career," he said. "You destroyed your career when you decided to steal from your wife and abandon your family. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it." He signed the document with shaking hands, then looked up at me with something approaching hatred. "You think you've won, but this isn't over. Zoya and you are finished," I interrupted. "She's lost her job, her reputation, and her financial security. You've lost your career, your marriage, and your money. There is no Zoya and you anymore." As Darren walked away, I felt the weight of the past few weeks finally lifting from my shoulders. Ilara and I had accomplished everything we'd set out to do. We'd exposed the affair, protected our financial interests, and ensured that both Zoya and Darren faced appropriate consequences for their actions. The trap had worked perfectly. Justice had been served, and for the first time in months, I could sleep peacefully, knowing that the people who'd tried to destroy my life had instead destroyed their own. The game was over, and we had won.